without further ado, Trina, let's get this party started.
Let's go right into it. You know what's funny is that my word for the year, and excuse me if I'm not looking in the camera and I'm looking at Scharrell, it's just that I can see her and this is the intimate conversation. So you're just going to peek in on us doing our thing, okay?
Exactly.
Word for the year is intentional, right?
Well, we both said that. Isn't that bananas? Right? The intentionality of creating the life that we want to live, the intentionality of leading the way we want to lead. And then really, we hit a pandemic.
You know, and I know that we have both led at some point during some crisis situation. You know, I've had a break-in at my office, a flood at my office, things like that. This pandemic, this is a showstopper. This is something completely off the chart. But what I'm interested in knowing in this particular crisis, Scharrell, what has been your greatest leadership challenge?
Oh, wow. My greatest leadership challenge is accepting the fact that I'm not as good as I thought I was. I think that there are a number of challenges that I find myself facing in this situation. But my greatest leadership challenge is being conscious of how I lead. You know, I have led with a naturalness about myself because I've been comfortable in the space of leadership, knowing that my leadership style was about what I truly believe is best for the organization and the people that I serve. But in the midst of a crisis, I have found that I have to be conscious of how I lead. And what I mean by that, it is not just what I do, but how I do it. It's not just what I say, but how I say it. And being aware of how people feel. And I don't mean that to say that I was insensitive to that, because I don't believe that I was intentionally insensitive. But now I am intentionally sensitive to those around me, the organization in which I serve, and how I lead. So to be intentional and conscious of it has been challenging. I just put myself out there. I mean, I am completely vulnerable because that has really been challenging for me.
No, I can imagine. How has it affected you personally?
Well, personally, depending on how people see me, most people think that I'm not a very sensitive person, but I think that I have learned how to lead beyond my emotions, which sometimes translates to others that you don't have them. But what I recognize is that my emotions have shown up more in the recent times than they have throughout most of my career, especially as I have matured as a leader. And one of the greatest impacts it's had on me is that I am really trying to deal with the burden that I feel leading an organization where I'm brand new, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but more importantly, lives are depending on this organization. As one of the leaders, the business decisions that we make impact the lives of the clients we serve and the people that we serve. And it's caused me to be a bit emotional. I mean, candidly, I think my first week I cried. I love my new role. I feel that I am perfectly suited for it. But knowing the impact that the business decisions that every business leader, every leader, even on this platform this morning, these decisions that we make are impacting lives in a way that we don't traditionally think about. It was pretty emotional for me. So it's impacted me in a way where I'm far more emotional than I've been as a leader. And I think I've shown that more than I typically have because your confidence gets a little shaken.
I know we were talking about you being new in that role, and that had to have been, to come into a new leadership role right in the middle of the pandemic and then asked to lead the disaster recovery in the pandemic with a team that doesn't even really know you. How can you speak a little bit on what that's been like?
I think for all of us as leaders, whether you have a relationship or not, this has been a scary time because we're second guessing ourselves. And oftentimes we feel that we need to have the collaboration of others just to validate the decisions that we make. And I think that when people know you, you have an opportunity to build a level of trust. And you also have an opportunity where people will extend you grace. But when you're walking into a new environment, typically you want to start by building relationships first, right? I mean, relationships are what garner trust. You want to create a level of intimacy. And then as you start to make decisions, people are not necessarily judging you by what you do or what you say, but who they've gotten to know. Well, when you start an organization and you're charged to be on a leadership team that is just, I mean, first of all, the team at BPM is absolutely outstanding. So I'm just grateful to be a part of the team. But I definitely, I'm a leader. So you start to contribute, you start to make recommendations, and you wonder if people are looking like, well, who is she and where did she come from? And who asked her her opinion anyway? Not that anybody thought that way. And they have been so kind to me and welcoming me into the organization. But quite frankly, I've met a very, very, very small percentage of people, and it's been virtually. So leading the charge, making recommendations around how we would handle the forecast of what could potentially happen to our organization, which meant that we needed to make some tough decisions. And being unafraid to bring forth some recommendations meant that some people may not like it. And not only that, but when decisions are made by business leaders that many people don't like, even if they believe it's the right decision, somebody has to be blamed. So what we do at BPM is we try and collectively share in the responsibility of the decisions that are made, but we can't take responsibility for how everybody feels. And some people haven't necessarily liked some of the decisions that we've made. And I've gotten some feedback that, I'm coming in with an agenda or I'm not being considerate of others. And I understand how people feel. And I think for all of us as leaders, everyone watching that's having to make these tough decisions, we have to know that and convey that these short-term decisions we're making are for long-term sustainability for our organization. And as long as we're authentic and we're honest and we're sharing with them that we are doing the very, very best that we can. I mean, my CEO, Jim Wallace, he's an amazing man. He is the reason why I am at BPM. And he said the other day in our town hall that we're doing the best that we can as leaders. And I think as leaders, we need to remember that. We need to remind ourselves of that. So being a part of the team, making the decisions, it's been tough because I don't have the relationships that I'd like to have, but we're doing the right thing.
So I love the fact that you talk about doing the best that you can.
Right.
I'm sure there's a lot of perfectionists out there who really have that fear of making the wrong decision or failure, or, I think even being a new CEO, having to address, how do I do things so I don't fail? Because you don't want to fail, but that's hard to lead that way, right? Because who knows what's going to happen? What would you say to people? Are there some tools that you use to make sure that in spite of fear, you're able to push through and make those tough decisions?
Well, I mean, you know me, and anyone who has seen me live or virtually know that I feel that you have to embrace your emotions. I mean, we are all going through different emotions, fear, anxiety. Some people are even experiencing a level of depression. And I think that it's okay to allow yourself to feel what you feel for a brief moment, but don't become your emotions and don't allow what you feel to dictate how you move. And so one of the tools that I would say is be conscious of how you make your decisions and whether or not they are tied to how you feel. The other thing is, I think that it's important that you embrace what you feel, accept it. Don't try and stuff your feelings and pretend like you are not feeling what you're feeling. We've got to be vulnerable as leaders. Our team members, our colleagues, our families, they need to know that these are unprecedented times, as everyone has said, we all know, and this is scary. So the things that we feel, we need to know that we feel it, we need to embrace it, but we still have got to move beyond what we feel. We cannot push our feelings down and be unashamed. We've got to be vulnerable. And then the other thing is you've got to have things around you that's going to motivate you and keep you inspired every single day so you can go out and put your best foot forward as a leader. You have still got to run your business. You still have to run your life. You still have to run your household. So it is important that you are focused. Know what your end game is every single day, and then monitor how you move to ensure that you're moving according to your end game. And those are just some of the things that I try and do as I start my day, as I move throughout my day. I try to refocus so that I am moving in alignment with what I want my end game to be. Not just in a crisis, but period, as a leader, right? I mean, don't you do the same thing, Trina?
I do. And I'm glad that you said that, because as a nonprofit, you are always focused on your mission.
Right.
And these are the times when that mission and being laser focused on that mission is more important than ever. It's ironic because we had just finished doing a new strategic plan. I think it got approved in February, by the way. And one of the things in that plan was new value statement. One of the values was making sure that every decision we made led to employment. Even now, as we make, and what's great about having those values and knowing ahead of time before a crisis, right, why you're going to make decisions, what your priorities are, knowing that helps during a crisis because you bring it back to that laser focused mission. Every decision is going to lead to employment. So when you do have to make tough decisions, you can kind of weigh it up against that value, weigh it up against. So I think that's critical, making sure that you're staying, your priorities are the same. Did your priorities shift at all during the crisis, or have your priorities pretty much stayed the same?
You know, the blessing for me is that I moved into an organization where foundationally the priorities, the mission, the vision, the leader is completely aligned with who I am as a person. BPM is because people matter. And so the reality of it is I am in a position now where everything we do is about our priorities, because our priorities are our people. And I think as business leaders, that is what all of our priorities would be. Our priorities are our client, which are our people. Our priorities are our team members, our staff, our leadership, the executives, the partners. Those are our people. And our priorities are ourselves, because we are our people. So because people matter becomes the foundation on how we lead the organization. The goal is that what our priorities are clearly translated to those that we serve. And I think as business leaders, we need to be more intentional about that as well. People need to understand not only what we're doing, but why we're doing it and what are our priorities. And, you know, something else you said, Trina, you talked about your mission and having a strategic plan around your mission. But one of the things I really want us to touch bases on is, why do so many of us lead an organization as if a crisis won't come? I mean,
yep.
What is happening?
This change is not going to happen.
Right. Like,
right?
Shouldn't that be part of the strategy? Shouldn't we as business leaders within our strategy have some sort of a plan that is around a crisis? I mean, think about it. If the better leader you are, the more intentional you are about leading your organization through and to success, it means that you've got to be able to pivot, right? I mean, you have to be able to change when the economy changes. You have to be able to shift when the consumer needs change. And that's another thing that I'm recognizing, that as a business leader, we want to make sure that we infuse throughout our organization, with our human capital, through our clients, because change is always coming. And the idea that we would be leading an organization not expecting change, shame on us.
It's funny because I just heard something this morning on the TV, and it was a preacher, but he was talking about flex space. A lot of times we don't build flex space into our planning, into our calendar, into anything. And you're right, you have to have that space to be able to shift personally, professionally. I know you were talking about adapting to the new way that BPM does their calendar. and it wasn't giving you any space to even have lunch, right?
Well, I didn't know, right? I left an environment where I completely controlled my calendar, and I went into an open calendar system, and I didn't know. And so in an open calendar system, anybody can put anything on your calendar, and I already operate like an elephant, so I already had my calendar full, and then other people were putting things on my calendar, and before I realized it, I didn't have any white space. And part of leading in the midst of a crisis is you have got to take time out for yourself, Trina. I mean, we cannot overwork ourselves so much to the point that we're sitting at these computers all day, barely taking a break, barely walking away. And we should really talk about why we're doing that. But the bottom line is, I went into a new environment with new business rules, and I needed to shift. I needed to pivot. And so I think that it's important that we keep that in mind as leaders, that we have always got to be ready to pivot and shift.
And you know what? I think we really have to set the stage and be the example. So you and I talked about this, right? I insist that my team take some time off. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I said, okay, we've been in this for 6 weeks. Everyone needs to schedule a day off, and it needs to be on a Monday or a Friday so you have a long weekend. Once all of you schedule your days off, I will then schedule my day off. So they've all scheduled theirs. I'm waiting for one person, you know who you are, to schedule your day.
You just called them out.
But now I'm wondering, should I have scheduled mine off first?
Well, I already told you, if I see you at that computer from 7 to 7, we're going to have some problems. But I think that what you've done is excellent. And we were talking about that in our leadership meeting in regards to our team members taking time off. I think that as leaders, we have got to remind and encourage others that being off work doesn't mean that you're at risk of losing your job. We also need to encourage others to take the time off. I mean, as we were discussing, the reality of it is I had a vacation plan prior to transitioning from my former employer to my new employer. And as a result of COVID, my vacation was canceled. But I actually canceled my time off. Nobody asked me to do that, but I did that. And as we were chatting, I realized that, I still need to take a vacation. I still need to take time off. I think that because so many people are afraid of what the outcome will be, because we really have no control, that we have planted ourselves at our desk or our computers, virtually or in the office for those of you who are essential, and we have stopped taking care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's important that we take care of ourselves. I mean, going back to how we started and you said, what are some of the things that you do? I miss getting my hair done. Like my new do, it's not a do really. My nails done. Some of the things that I used to do regularly. But why can't I stop and do some things at home and take time out? So I ordered me a little pedicure bucket and sit out on my patio and take 2 hours, because it takes me about 2 hours to give myself a pedicure and give myself a pedicure. Look, the bottom line is you can have your husband give you one, your child, anybody, but we have got to take some time off for ourselves, even in the midst of a crisis. And that's what being a great leader is about. Setting the example like you did and requiring us to take care of ourselves and then doing it ourselves. That's really
important. I agree with you. I think that sometimes we don't take that time to make sure that we're okay. And you and I talked a little bit about making those tough decisions around your staff. So, right. One of the toughest decisions that people have had to make is to let go of people or to fire people or to, reduction in their staff. And just the thought of that, is something that I cannot even, it's funny because I can kind of separate myself from a business perspective. I can look at the numbers and determine what's necessary, what's needed. But from a personal, to be honest with you, I'm not sure I could actually do it. And you and I talked and I said, you know what? I'd almost be willing to kind of cast myself. I'd almost be willing to step down so that others could stay afloat. But you gave me some good advice on that. What was it?
Well, I'm glad you think it was good advice, but I think that, as leaders, that should already be part of the strategic plan, right? When we're building a strategic plan, oftentimes we're driving the plan to increase our revenue and increase our profit. But part of the strategy has to be what happens if the market retracts, right? If we have a retraction or some sort of a crisis like we're in, what is our plan? And I think that it's easier to execute a plan when it's already laid out. It's hard to make these decisions when you didn't plan for them. But what I was saying as a leader is that it's our responsibility to make the right decision, the best decision for our organization. And we can't do it from an emotional place. Look, we have to remember that we are not responsible for the way people feel. Most of our employee base is afraid, anxious, might be depressed, unsure because of this lack of uncertainty in the marketplace. But we're not responsible for that. And so we have to continue to make the right business decision. And we have to be open and honest with our team members on why we're doing what we're doing. The great thing that we were able to do at BPM, or at least our strategy, was sometimes you've got to make short-term decisions for long-term sustainability. So if that means that we know that the forecast is that at some point economically we're going to be hit. Why? Because our clients are going to be hit. If our clients take some sort of a decrease in their revenue, they're going to have to look at the vendors that they have to pay, right? And so that means that we have to safeguard the organization. Well, it would be much better to maybe furlough some people for a short-term basis so that you can sustain the storm, because we all know storms come. And then on a long-term basis, bring those people back. But I think what we do is we get paralyzed and we don't do anything. But here's what you and I talked about. As a leader in a crisis, if my house is on fire, am I just going to sit around and do nothing? No, I'm not. Sometimes you have to make a decision. I am not going to be sitting around thinking, well, should I? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should wait. Well, it's only burning in the kitchen. It hasn't really gotten upstairs. No, you've got to make a decision. And I think that a lot of leaders are paralyzed because they don't want to make a decision because of how it's going to make them feel or what they believe the impact will be on others. We know that times will be hard, but this is a small portion of our life. And in the end, we're going to be fine. We're going to pivot. We're going to reinvent ourselves. We should be taking advantage of what's going on in the marketplace, which I know we're going to talk about. But ultimately, as a leader, make a decision. So my decision is grab my kids and get out the door, and I'll rebuild later. And sometimes it's that dramatic. You know, other times it may be some things I can save and some things I can't. But the bottom line is we have to decide, and we have to know that we're making the best decision. Forgive ourselves, give ourselves some grace, and keep moving forward.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. And that was really some good advice. I want to talk a little bit about managing up. So I know you mentioned your CEO, and I know he's behind you, but I know you're still something that you're getting used to, working with a different type of person. What about those instances where you're managing up, and maybe what if the person who is over you, your leader, is maybe not on board, and maybe he's panicking? And do you have any tools for how you might be able to navigate that situation?
You know, I'm grateful that that's not my situation, but I have heard, you know, I get emails and people are struggling with how to keep people motivated, how to keep their team members motivated, how to work with a CEO who seems to be a little bit paralyzed. And I think that, you know, we have to ask questions sometimes. I think oftentimes we draw conclusions based on what we're experiencing without that why. And I would encourage anyone who is struggling in their organization, whether they have individuals that are working with them who may be negative or who are sort of a doom and gloom, because you're dealing with that. And then you have a CEO or a leader in your organization, your department, who isn't really making decisions, that it is important that we are open and honest, and that we ask those questions that we don't always want the answer to. Like, what is our plan? What is our short and our long-term goal? How are we positioned in order to meet or to exceed our plan? What is the strategy? And then how are we going to do it? Sometimes you just have to pose the question, and it'll reset the mind. It'll have the person to start to think, oh, okay, well, I didn't share that with you. Maybe they do have the plan. Or I haven't actually thought about that. Let's sit down and write out that strategy, or let's work through it, or let's talk about it. but ask the question. Be unafraid to ask that which you want to know. Sometimes we don't ask the questions that we want to know the answer to. Then we're mad because we don't know the answer. Well, ask the question, right?
But I love you talk about that, because communication during a crisis, right? Communication during a crisis becomes one of the most important tools that you have. Do you think you can over communicate during this time?
Well, I struggle with communication, period, and I'm a speaker, so I think it's interesting. I tend to over communicate in a crisis because you want to make sure that there is clarity and that you're on the same page. And I think that in the midst of a crisis, more is better, because people draw their own conclusions naturally. And I believe it's heightened when there is fear as an overlay of an emotion. And so it's our responsibility to bring security to those who are afraid. I mean, you go back to the example I used about the house being on fire. And as a leader, the last thing I'm getting ready to do is say, oh my God, the house is on fire. Well, if I panic, what do you think my kids are going to do? I need to be strong. I need to be able to let them know that no matter what, we're going to be fine. And I don't need to say it if I don't believe it. I need to believe it. So as a leader, I think that we do need to communicate to our team members what's going on in our organization, that which is appropriate, right? And I do think that we need to ensure that they understand. And that's where over communicating comes in. Because sometimes we say things based on the way our brain works, and we don't consider the way other people hear it or how they translate it. And as a leader, we have a responsibility to ensure that the message we are conveying is received in the manner in which we expect, and not assume that people understand us. That's part of our responsibility as an intentional leader, don't you think?
I think that's some great advice. As a matter of fact, I also have an issue with communication sometimes, because I'm in my mind. I know what I want to do. I know where I want to go sometimes, and I'm off and running and assuming that everyone is following me. I look back, hey, where is everyone? I think part of it is I've had to kind of step back and lead from behind a little bit more and let the culture and the values kind of dictate. We have a new chief development officer, Yumiko, you know her, and
Yes.
She is an excellent communicator. And one of the things that she's really brought to our organization is that communication and making sure that our board knows what's going on, that our staff knows what's going on, that our donors know what's going on. And it has enabled us to be better at letting people know where we're going, and most importantly, why we're going there. So I don't know that you can over communicate during these times, right?
And I think that sometimes it has to be different voices. As leaders, oftentimes we think we have to be the one to tell everybody everything all the time. And sometimes we need to kick back and allow other members of our leadership team to share what the strategy is, what the business goals are, because they have the power of influence just like we do. In some instances, even greater than we do. And so it's important that through our collaborative leadership, that those of us who are leading departments, initiatives, people, that we know we're all on the same page. Oftentimes as leaders, I think we make the mistake of executing or sharing a charge or initiative or a position, and then making the assumption that everybody's bought in. and we never bothered to ask if they were bought in. We don't even know the story that they're telling when they walk away from the meeting. So it's very, very important that we are confident through conversation and translation that we're all on the same page. And then we give others an opportunity to have a voice to convey the message in a way in which their team members will receive it. And that way we're all on the same page. So I do believe that over communicating is imperative. I don't know about you, Trina, but we got some things coming through this chat. And
there's a lot, there's a lot of chat stuff.
And so we're figuring this thing out because we want to look at you and be engaged. And I wish I could see your beautiful faces, but we also want to be sensitive to the individuals who are in the chat. So we're going to take a minute and kind of look over. And, while Trina's taking a look at that, I want to remind you all to, if you hear something of value, please push it out on social media, tweet it, use our hashtags, but please push that out, because this conversation is for everybody. We know that, you know, people are struggling. And even if your business hasn't taken an economic hit, there is still a sense of overlaying fear that is out in our community. People are paranoid. They don't want to go outside. They're scared if they don't have a mask on, or if somebody else doesn't have a mask on. It's impacting the way that we relate with one another. I think that, you know, I don't believe in the term social distancing. I call it physical distancing, but I don't believe it's important also to compromise relationship. And so I'd love for us to chat a little bit about that, because I think we are so laser focused on our business that we have forgotten about what matters most. And that's our relationships. And that's our relationships at work, our relationships at home. I don't know, Trina, what do you think about that?
You know what I do, and I find myself, I actually sent a card to a friend just out of the blue. You know, I'm just going to stop and write this card and send it. Someone said, sometimes we act, and we've talked about this, sometimes you lead as if change never happens, and sometimes we live as if we always are going to have tomorrow.
Right.
I think sometimes you have to stop and take notice of those things that are truly important, and make sure that you are telling someone every day how much they mean to you. You know, a song I learned as a little girl, and it goes, give him the roses while he lives, to cheer him on, because useless the flowers that you give after the soul is gone. So taking a moment to send those flowers, to send those cards, to drop a line. You know, a lot of times we assume, oh, we see them on Facebook, we like their post, so they know we care. And that's not always true, especially right now, right? Some people are feeling, not everyone, but some people really are feeling isolated.
Right.
And a call from you can make a big difference.
It really can. And, you know, there were some questions around, what do you do when you're feeling isolated? And I think, you know, what we're speaking on is critical. You know, like you, I've done some of the same things, just sending some flowers to people, letting them know that you love them, or dropping them a card, or sending them a note, or doing these virtual meetings and having virtual happy hours and things of that nature. But, I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that it's important that we maintain intimacy, and that we maintain relationship, and that we don't isolate ourselves so much that it just becomes about our family. Look, our responsibility as leaders is to serve others. It's way beyond ourselves. And so I think that we need to stay intentional about that. And another thing that you just mentioned, Trina, is around the fact that we're not ready for change. I mean, as leaders, we talk about being change agents, and yet we're in this massive panic because we're in the midst of the biggest change that most of us have experienced. Well, change is part of being a leader, right? And as I mentioned earlier, all of us going forward needs to make sure that our strategic plan includes change for the better and change for the worse. We have got to have a plan around retraction when revenue. We should already know, if you have C players on your team, and I know that it does not sound nice, you need to build your bench strength. Many people are talking about, well, how do I do that? There are not very many jobs. We all have to be prepared to reinvent ourselves. And, you know, we have to consider that, knowing that change is coming, are we ready for change? And so when we walk away from this meeting this morning, as you are working through just navigating your day to day, also think about your future. Think about where your business is going to be in 1 year, in 3 years. If it was outside of your control, are you prepared as a business leader? You know, I tell my children all the time, this life that you live, this is my life. But if I were to lose something, how would we live? And that's being prepared for the what if. We always have to think about that. If the luxuries of the life that you live today were no longer here, what would you do? And if you are prepared for that, you don't panic. You know, well, it was good while we had it, but we don't have it anymore. We get ready to pivot. So I'm just saying that, it sounds funny, but it's the reality. And I think that if we as leaders are open and honest about the fact that we don't have the control that we think we have, then when these things come our way, it won't take us off guard, right? We won't feel like
you brought that up. I told my team when this first thing happened, I mean, what we do is work with job seekers. And I went around and asked my team, how many of you right now could write a great cover letter and resume and go find a new job?
Oh,
I'm embarrassed to say not everyone raised their hand. So that was one of the things. Everyone needs to have a good resume. Everyone needs to know how to write a cover letter. Everyone needs to look good on LinkedIn, because you know what? There's a lot we don't have control over.
Right.
And I will fight tooth and nail with everything I have to make sure that WHW stays here, stays working, profitable, and helping job seekers. I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. I don't know what's around the corner.
And how are you helping job seekers if there's not very many jobs?
Exactly.
Right. And so we've got to be ready to reinvent ourselves. I encourage everyone to really dig deep and think about the things that you are naturally good at. You know, there are things that we are naturally good at, and we have an opportunity to capitalize off of what we're going through right now. I actually believe that there is a plan and a purpose for everything that happens in our life. And I know that this is not our end game for companies that may have to close their doors, for leaders who may have to lay off a percentage of their staff, that we have to realize how great we are individually and collectively. And we all have something to offer. We have to position our organization so that it doesn't get Uberized, as I always say, you know, where we aren't ready for the shift and all of a sudden taxi has been taken over by Uber, or Blockbuster's been knocked out the box by Netflix because they weren't prepared to pivot. As business leaders, what are you going to do now, right? We are working virtually, and many companies, CEOs weren't even open to virtual workspace. And many of them even have the nerve to be waiting until we can go back to work so they can keep doing things the way that they used to do.
Which is crazy. It doesn't even make any sense. I am so happy with what my staff has done in the last 6 to 8 weeks. They have just upskilled themselves. They have got on board. They are moving. And you know what's funny, Scharrell, we talked about this a little bit yesterday in our small group. And that is, sometimes when you go through change, you look at what you've lost instead of what you've gained. And yes, what we lost is our physical space and doing some of the things that we used to do. But what we've gained is a staff that is much more skilled. You should see some of the things that they're doing now. It is amazing. And I don't think we would have gotten here in such a short amount of time had there not been a crisis.
You know, I think as business leaders, we have to consider exactly what you said, because it's forcing us, to the extent that you are innovative and strategic, to rethink the way we do business. It's forcing us to consider operating in a different manner. I mean, we're talking about modified working hours. In other words, a hybrid approach. Who said business hours had to be 8 to 5 or 9 to 6 or 7 to, who said that? Who said that you couldn't have the flexibility of the workday? Who said that you have to operate in a brick and mortar concept and yet you can't have the virtuality of being able to get work done? And that forces you to look at how you service your clients, how you produce your product. Is there a more innovative way that you can do that so you can continue to scale your business, whether you're in a pandemic or not? Or are you positioned as a business leader to continue to grow in the midst of a crisis? And so that means we have to reevaluate how we're running our organization. And think about it. If we are open to the flexibility of a hybrid work environment where you're working at home and you're working in the brick and mortar or in the location itself, the population of personnel just opens up. I mean, you can hire somebody sitting in Oklahoma and be running your office in New York, and you're able to reduce your operating expenses and gain a maybe higher talent. So there's a lot that we can gain through change, but it first starts with our mind. I think we have to rethink the way we think, and that'll help us to be even better leaders. You know, Trina, I was looking at the chat and someone was asking about managing the sleep and how do you talk, who do you speak with personally to keep on track with yourself? And that was, you know, one of the things that we had talked about in a question that came up on just how you keep your tank full, right?
Oh, yeah. How do you even know it's empty?
Well, you know, that's a good point, because we were talking about that. We were talking about how you end up giving everything that you have. Look, leaders, I'm talking to you. If you got one person in your life that you influence, you care for, that you take care of, that you feel responsible for, then you're a leader. And your team, your family, your husband, your wife, your children, your friends, your colleagues, they need you, but they need you at your best self. You cannot give somebody that which you don't have. And so it starts first with you. You have to make sure that you're taking care of you. You got to have that tribe of people around you that are going to motivate you, inspire you, and tell you the truth about yourself. So when you're going in a direction that's not going to yield your best self, have that tribe of people that you give permission to be honest with you. Take the time you need to care for yourself. Get some sleep. Go to bed. Turn the phone off. You're going to live without it. Don't be looking at it when you first wake up in the morning. Make sure that you're getting some form of exercise. If it's walking or doing whatever it is that you do, eat well. The blessing is you can't eat that much junk. So eat well. You know, these are really simple, small things we hear as a child, but for whatever reason, we grow up and we think part of being a leader is we have to give ourselves away, that we have to give everything we have to somebody else to a point where you have nothing left to give. But think about it. When your car is on E, will it run? You know, people might have to be able to push it, but it's really not running at an optimal level. Well, that's the same thing that happens with us. When we start to be on E, we are not effective leaders. Heck, I'm not even a great person. So it's really, really important that we take care of ourselves. Find your own thing that works for you. For me, since that was a question in the chat, I start my day off with prayer. I have a prayer partner. I start my day off with prayer. I have a routine that I follow. I listen to the Daily Hope. I listen to Darren Hardy. I like to get some business advice. I like to get some spiritual food for my soul. There are things that I do, you know, and then I make a declaration to myself. You know, now this may sound crazy, but I look myself in the morning and I say to myself, good morning, badass. You're going to have an outstanding day. But I make a decision on what my day is going to be. And it's not predicated on what I've been through or what I'm facing. So in the attitude that I choose to have to ensure that I yield the return that I desire. So what about you, Trina? What do you do to start your day? How do you refuel your tank?
Well, first of all, I have a problem sometimes recognizing that I need to be refueled. I always think for my car, never let your car get below a quarter of a tank. But to your point, Scharrell, sometimes I let myself get below a quarter of a tank. And right. I know it because you can feel it. Now, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to see anything. And I know that's not good. So in the morning, I also listen to the Daily Hope. That's a great way to start the day. I love to have just some quiet time by myself in the morning. So for WHW, I'm the only one coming in the office. So we're closed, but I normally come in the office, be able to get the mail and that. But I love to get here really, really early when it's very quiet and I can be by myself and kind of set myself up for the day. At the end of the day, I too read some of the Bible, stop, think. We have our weekly small group. I just like to make sure that I'm in the Word of God, that I'm giving myself, you know, a lot of times to your point, I love to tell myself, you know what, Trina, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And you know what? God's got you.
Right.
He got you. And he wouldn't have put you in the situation if he did not prepare you for it, right? He doesn't put you in something where he hasn't prepared you. So I just look to that. And, you know, and I also have a couple people around me who I can go to, who give me great advice. And I love what you say about you have to have people around you who will be honest with you.
Right.
You don't just want a bunch of yes people. You want someone who says, yeah, I don't think that's the best decision and this is why. So, yeah.
And you know, leaders, we oftentimes, we got to set our ego aside. I mean, we say we want to be better, but then who tells us where our blind spots are? I mean, if you don't have anybody telling you that you have an opportunity to improve, that means you have a large opportunity to improve because nobody's got this thing perfectly. We've got to give people the right to tell us the truth about ourselves, even though we don't like the way it makes us feel. You know, that's how we're going to level up as leaders. We don't know everything we need to do in the midst of this. But what we do know is that we have an opportunity. And so it's important that we pair up with other leaders who have either accomplished that which we desire or that we admire and we respect. And then they need to tell us where we have an opportunity to improve. So often we want to hear about how awesome we are. Well, okay, you're awesome, But the reality of it is none of us are perfect and we all have an opportunity to improve. So how about we slide a little bit of that into our growth model and we start seeking out how we can become better leaders. And I think that it's going to require us to kind of take our egos to the side, alleviate some of this pride, and understand that we don't know it all. And it's okay, and be vulnerable. Just make sure it's someone that you feel safe with, but you need that. You know, another question that came up is, how are you staying engaged and motivated to your team?
Your team, I see that right now. How do you connect to them in this pandemic? I have a small team, so being engaged with them is actually pretty easy. We have staff meetings, we have training meetings every week. We touch one-on-one, we do a lot of Zoom, phone calls. And one of the biggest changes that we have made is that over communication. So there are things that our team is being communicated about and information that we're sharing that we did not used to necessarily share. But it's really important that everyone steps up and becomes a leader during this. Because it's hard to have one or two leaders. Everyone needs to be a leader.
Right.
You can't be a leader if you don't have the facts and the information that it takes to be one.
But see, that's where as leaders, we have to look to our bench strength. And this is where we have to recognize when we need to make some tough decisions, because cream rises to the top. And what does it leave left? I mean, the reality of it is some of us have people on our team that can't take us to the next level. And while it doesn't feel right that you've called that out, even in your mind, if you haven't laid out a plan to make some shifts, we've got to make some shifts. You've got to be well positioned in your organization to be able to weather storms. And when you have people on your team that cannot carry their weight, they do not need to be in that role. It is important that you continue to make tough decisions. Now, you may want to weigh out the timing in which you make those decisions, and that's your choice. But the reality of it is you can't win a game if everybody's not contributing to the win. And that's in anything we do, whether it's at home, whether it's your marriage, whether it's your career, whether it's athletic. Everybody has to contribute to the win. A great wife can't save a marriage if the husband isn't great. A great family can't be built if both parents aren't great. The kids have to participate as well. On the job, the CEO cannot do it alone. You have to have the COO. Everybody needs to carry their weight. So I think it's very, very important that we take a look at our bench strength and that we identify our key players and we identify those that are weighing us down. You know, there was, in terms of just staying motivated with your team and the things that you said that you're doing, some people are kind of zoomed out. You know, people feel like if I have one more Zoom meeting. But I do think that it is important that you have one-on-ones with your team members as well, that as business leaders, we need to take the time to connect with our team members just to see how they're doing. I'm in an awkward space because I'm new on my job. And so I haven't met very many people, and I'm trying to do one-on-ones with the partners and the leadership team. And we're in the midst of this initiative, which means we're driving change. And so I think that, you know, if I had an opportunity to restart, I probably would have just taken more of a step back and taken more time to get to know the people, because a lot of what I believe people feel about another person is based on their experience and or what they see or hear. I mean, think about how many people we pass judgment on that we don't even know, right? Because we heard that they did or said something through social media or the news or whatever. And so I think as leaders, we need to be conscious of that as we manage our brand. But I think, you know, being connected to your team and having those one-on-ones and picking up the phone sometime and just calling and saying, how you doing? That's
I think also, you know, I mail things to my team too. So sometimes, you know, I'll mail them some WHW pens or a notepad or a sticker or a card or just something to make sure that they know, hey, we're still a team and we're still connected, not just as a team, but also I have a one-on-one with each of you. So staying connected to your team is so critical right now.
It is.
And I love what you talk about. You know, we'd had a question about if you could go back and do something different, knowing this was coming. And I think a lot of people would have made different decisions about their team beforehand, because what happens is in a crisis, that small crack right? So you're thinking, well, I got this many people, they can kind of overshadow this person who's not pulling their weight. Now, all of a sudden, that small crack becomes huge. Now, all of a sudden, you realize, wow, that's not a small decision to let that crack remain in your organization.
I think, when you think about if you had something to do over again, what would you do differently? Part of the strategy would have been being more intentional about making decisions faster. I think that, really looking at your organization on a periodic basis, whatever that is for you, and not just forecasting, as I mentioned early, around, the growth of the organization, but really looking at your human capital. And as you're forecasting the growth, looking at your human capital to see if you have the bench strength to get you where you want to go, how you're dealing with low performers, and whether or not you're making the decisions fast enough. Or you, as the business leader making decisions, are you deferring because you don't want to make a tough decision and you want the decision to be on somebody else? I mean, part of being a leader is you got to make the tough decisions. And sometimes you're the one people aren't going to like. And when everything's going great, they're going to love everybody else. And that's okay. I mean, that's really what leadership is all about. I wanted to take a look over. So sorry, guys, we're kind of looking and we're figuring this thing out. Next time
so there's a couple questions about WHW's board of directors, and one of the ways, so they're my boss basically. So that's who leads me theoretically. And in dealing with our board of directors, I think really it's about communication. One of the things that we've done is make sure that we can answer their questions before they're asked. So just making sure you're ahead, that you're managing up, that you already know they're probably thinking what they're probably going to ask, and that you already have that information prepared for them. That has been huge in dealing with our board.
Proactive leadership. Proactive leadership. That's one of the things in working with the team members. I share with them that as you're developing a plan, a workflow, anything, your plan needs to include the answers to the questions before they get asked.
Yep.
And I think that as business leaders, we need to have that prepared for our personnel, for our staff also. We need to have continual meetings with them to let them know the state of the organization and the things that we don't know. We need to let them know what we're not sure of. We need to be candid about that. It's important that we're open and we're honest and we're vulnerable. Someone asked a comment about, these are some great comments that you guys are sending. I appreciate this because this is hard. It's hard to do this virtually and not see you. So I appreciate it.
Well, here's a good question.
What's that?
You still make a cutoff time for work and personnel, so like work hours. And I will say, so some of our staff is hourly, and we have had to make sure that they know you are supposed to work 8 hours. Although working virtually, I know you're not working 9 to 5:30 with a half-hour lunch.
Right.
And one of the things that I've had to do is make sure you need to fill out that timesheet every single day. Don't hand me at the end of a pay period a timesheet that says 9 to 5:30, 9 to 5:30, because I know that's not true. So, and it doesn't matter to me when they put those 8 hours in, as long as it's 8. But what's important is that they take time for themselves. I don't care if you take a 3-hour lunch, as long as there's 8 hours within the day and that you get the job done that we need you to do. So for some, work hours are still there. For some, obviously, for the exempt, they're not.
And I'm hopeful that many business leaders, to the extent that they can, are more flexible around business work hours, because to your point, it really is about getting the work done. And to the extent that you have people on the bench that are not pulling their weight, then why are they even on the team? I mean, really, if you have to be so worried about whether or not someone is doing something at a particular time, then you don't have the right person on the team anyway.
I
agree.
So
in my opinion, yes, there are certain functionalities that work together. If you're on assembly line, everybody needs to be in their place at the appropriate time. But there are a lot of opportunities where we can be more flexible, which means as leaders, we have to change the way that we think. And then the other thing as leaders is that we have to lead by example. Someone put in the comment that they realized that they weren't even taking a lunch break while working from home, and because they felt like they needed to be available for everyone. Look, you got to, like I said earlier, you got to take care of yourself. You have to take some time out. You can't be all things to all people and not be anything to yourself. So if you don't get anything this morning, I need you to get that. It's important that you are available to your team members within reason. And I think that it's important that we continue to set appropriate boundaries throughout the situation, and we start to reevaluate the boundaries that we have. That was a really good question. And then, another question I see is, let's see. Thank you. This is something from Burkinda Khan. I think it is. That's a very nice comment that you made. Hey, Taya, good morning. I'm glad to know that you're here. The comment around keeping your employees engaged. Also, in terms of, we talked about having one-on-ones, but have some fun with your employees too. We just did a virtual happy hour with the leadership team, and we played 3 truths and a lie. And 2 truths and a lie. And quite frankly, the virtual happy hour, I want to say, was about 30 minutes. It was 10 or so people on the line, but it was fun to really get to know each other. So there's things that you can do with your team members to lighten things up and to continue to connect. I think that's important. And don't just—
I like that idea. Do you care if I steal it?
No, go ahead. I want to say either my CEO or my CIO, it was their idea. They had done it prior to me starting with the organization, and it was great. I just wanted to have an opportunity to get to know everyone because I don't know very many people. And I'm coming in as the new boss. I'm asking questions, and we never had an opportunity to connect. So it makes the relationship start a little more difficult. So I thought it was great. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue to have these things, whether we're in a pandemic or not. I think that's part of the reset, right? Mm-hmm. Like we need to reevaluate the way we were leading pre-COVID.
Right.
Why does it take COVID for us to start thinking about how intimate we are with our team members?
You had a great question, Scharrell, that kind of leads right into that. And it was about women leaders and how you feel now post-COVID. Now that everyone is able to work virtually, now childcare could be less of an issue, let's say. Do you see possibly this being a situation where women could move up more in senior management, or what do you think about that? How does this affect women leaders specifically, you think?
Candidly, I don't know that the two are related. I think, quite frankly, we know that we live in a society that at the end of the day, while women have gained a lot of traction, we still have a long way to go. I mean, we have a long way to go in terms of the number of women that sit in the CEO seat, and we certainly have a long way to go when it comes to the compensation gap. And so it really is going to depend on the women and what we choose to do at this time. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is an opportunity. Think about how many companies have stopped spending money on advertising. Mm-hmm. So to the extent that you decided to spend some money on marketing, the space in which you have available to you is endless, because a lot of people have retracted, right? They're not doing so many things. And so there are opportunities to capitalize in the midst of fear, because a lot of people get paralyzed during fear. So as women, it depends on the steps that we're going to take. Look, there's not that many people like Jim Wallace, for example, my CEO, who's going to reach across and pull you forward. There's just not that many of them. I'm lucky, I'm blessed. But everybody doesn't have that. Everybody doesn't have someone who is going to ensure that they, if they're qualified, can move into a space in which they deserve and have earned. So we have to continue to do the work as women. We have to continue to educate ourselves. We have to ask for what we want and stop waiting for somebody to give it to us. Because as women, we're nurturers, most of us. And so we think we'll just do the right thing and somebody will come along and sweep us up and say, oh, you're so awesome. It's not going to happen like that, ladies. You're going to do the right thing and somebody's going to see it, and you're going to do more of the right thing, and you're going to do more of the right thing, and you're going to do more of the right thing, because that's what we do. And so we have to be willing to go for what we want and not feel bad when someone is not recognizing us. We've got to ask for it. We've got to put ourselves out there. And this is an opportunity. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I really am. There's a question from my son. It's not interesting. It says, do you still make a cutoff time for work and personal?
That's the question I already asked you. I saw Don's question.
That was from my son. Well, I had to give my son a shout out. You said my greatest accomplishment is being a mom. So, hi, big son. Thank you for joining us.
No, your sons are awesome. I have to say, she's got 3 of them. I don't have any kids. I said, if I had known there were boys out there like yours, I would have had me a daughter because those boys are amazing.
They actually are. I'm pretty lucky. I appreciate that. So one of the other questions from Bonita says, if your team members are not contributing, what do you do to help them get up to speed?
You know, one of the things that we've been doing is offering training every week. So we're upskilling. So part of our strategic plan was to list every skill set necessary to effectively run the organization. And awesome. We had 4 meetings where we explained each skill. We told how it contributed, how it looks when it's done right, how it looks when it's done wrong, and then assigned different learning opportunities within each skill. So now our team knows exactly what skills are necessary. They're now determining where am I strong, where am I weak, where do I need to spend more time. And as we put together a plan going forward, we're able to now kind of assign people based on their skills, role that you're going to take based on that. So
no, that's awesome. You know, there are a few team members that I'm working with and working with them on just really reevaluating the way that they operate. And through this evaluation, I am actually giving them the exposure to start to identify gaps and opportunities in their process. And it's interesting to watch the faces glow when they think, oh, I could actually do that differently. And so to that question, whatever mechanism you have to train, I think this is a perfect opportunity, as you mentioned, Trina, to really start to train your team members, to develop workflows so that your team members understand not only what they do, but why they do it. How does it intersect in the business? Whether or not what they're doing is really the most optimal and efficient process. I mean, we are looking at processes to ensure that we can continue to scale our business. And scalability is not just about growth at the top and bottom line, but it's also about being able to operate no matter where you are, right? If you have a paper process and all of a sudden you have to go virtual, you can't scale that. So you should have processes in place that regardless of what the economic climate is or where you're sitting, your business can continue to sustain. And so we're looking at various processes within the organization to ensure that we can scale. And by involving those individuals who actually are responsible for those roles and responsibilities, it also allows them an opportunity to level up and to gain a higher level of visibility in how to run an organization or a department and understand the value of their contribution. And then you're also able to see whether or not you have the right people in the right role. So I think that we have that responsibility as a leader. Gregory Scott just asked me, what is the secret sauce and you of being an African-American leader during a pandemic in Orange County? Well, I don't know that there's a secret sauce. And I don't even know that being an African-American matters at this point in time. I think what really matters is that you are a great leader. And I think that when you are operating in a manner where you have the technical background, the education, you have the professional acumen, and you have the courage to do what is right, then your opportunities are there. Now, does that mean that you are not facing a different level of challenges if you are a woman or you're an African American? Well, it depends on who you're looking to work with. But what I have decided is that I don't really want to work with that person anyway. So anybody who's not interested in working with me because I'm a woman or I'm an African American, I'm not really interested in working with you. So I think the secret sauce is in lining ourselves up with those where foundationally we have similarities, our beliefs. And look, BPM is because people matter. Anybody who knows me knows that foundationally it's a perfect match, right? I mean, I had an opportunity to be in an environment under my former leader who is just exceptionally brilliant. And we started, I started with him when the organization was like, maybe 30 people, 20 plus 30, 3.5 million, and walked away of a, 600 plus organization, 140 plus $1 million organization. And so I am so proud of what I was able to do. And now I'm in an organization where my opportunity, my decision to accept this opportunity was primarily based on who I am as a person. It wasn't really about what I could do. I mean, I'm sure the opportunity came because of what I could do, but the decision for me to accept it was about who I am as a person. So I think that it's important as leaders that we really start to make sure that we line up our clients, our human capital, in alignment with our foundational beliefs, and be unafraid that if we do the right thing by ourselves and by those that work with us, there is no limit to the success that we can have. I don't know if that,
I think being an African American leader, I always remember things that my mom always said. You're representing more than just yourself. My mom always, speak up, sit up straight, never go to the back. You're going to have to work twice as hard to be counted as equal. And those things just become part of who you are. And you know what, to be honest with you, it's a privilege. I know some people might think of it as something that's difficult, something that you have to carry all the time, but it's a privilege to me to represent African-American women, African-American leaders, especially in Orange County where you don't have as many. So sometimes it's tough, sometimes it's hard, but you know what? It's a privilege, and I'm not sure I would change anything about it.
An interesting thing is, regardless of what your challenges are, we all have tough challenges. Mm-hmm. And I think that what happens is we lean in on what we don't have and we don't focus on what we do. And, as we prepare to get to a close of this session, I want to make sure that it is clear that we look at that in every area of our life holistically, whether you're a female, whether your business is struggling during this pandemic, whether you're African American, whether you're a male, whether you are handicapped, whether you don't feel skilled, whatever the situation is. We spend too much time focusing on what we're not and what we don't have, instead of focusing on what we are and what we do have. And I think if we change our mind and we refocus and reset, and we start to move according to what we are, we start to move according to what we want, we move according to what we are capable of doing, and stop focusing on stuff that you can't control. Look, the bottom line is we don't know when we're going back to work, and we don't know if when we go back to work, we're going to end up having to leave again. We don't know now that this pandemic has come, if they get a vaccine, will it come back? We don't know that another one might not come later. But what we do know is what we are capable of individually and collectively. And we need to start living our lives and running our organizations by building the strength around us, collaborating with those who want to move in the same direction that we want to move, and then moving forward for the win. There's no other option. I mean, it's like I told my kids, I don't care what you do, but whatever it is that you do, you better be the best at it. And I think that's the way that we need to lead our organizations and really live our lives. Right?
I love that.
Someone asked about giving some examples of flex space. I think we do want to at least have an opportunity to chat about what happens when you go back to work, if you have it. Mm-hmm. And just tangibly, I want to share that there's some things that I am considering and recommending to our leadership team. And that's around how we go back to work, if in fact we go back to work. Also, when. I think you need to set the timing based on when you are ready as an organization, not what your local government says. If local government was to say, oh, everybody go back to work June 1st, I don't think that we're ready to go back to work June 1st, nor do we have to. So remember to make the decision that's best for your organization, not from an emotional place. And then make sure that your organization, that you are ready to go back to work. So again, we're looking at a lot of things, hybrid work environments. Do the hours need to be 9 to 6? Can we have some flexibility around that? There are going to be a lot of moms who have children whose kids are going to be home. They won't be going back to school. And so what level of flexibility are we going to bring around that? How do we think about that? I mean, moms are the best people you can have on the bench. I was a single mom for 17 years, and I am a COO of an organization, and I am a great employee. But the fact that I was a single mom and I needed to juggle being a mom and taking care of my children didn't mean that I should have had to make a decision on my career. I think as business leaders, we need to rethink the way we judge people, and we need to set our organization up to be flexible. And then if there are physical distancing requirements, that's where staggered work hours come in play, right? I mean, maybe you have some people coming in from 8 to 12 and some people coming in from 12 to 4 and another shift coming in from 4 to 8. Who's to say that you can't have flexibility? I've reached out to all of my landlords to see what level of flexibility will they have around air conditioning and access to the offices to start to rethink the way that we go back to work. And then in some instances, you may actually have to reconfigure your furniture or maybe not have some people sit in certain places so that they're not up against each other. The bottom line is start thinking about innovation and be prepared to do something different. Do not sit there waiting to go back to do the same thing that you did before this came into play.
I agree. I think thinking and planning, and I love it about innovation, because these are the times when things get innovative. These are the times when those innovative leaders will rise to the top, and next thing you know, you're talking about something that someone invented 5 years ago because of some, crisis situation. So absolutely, have a plan, have a plan.
Have a plan. And the comment was made about being ready to go back to work is absolutely true. I mean, my plan is return to office plan because everybody's working. You just may not be in the office space. So I think the languaging that we use around the social distancing versus physical distancing, I think, there's a play on words oftentimes. Return to work when everybody is giving their best as opposed to return to office plan. I think that those are some of the things that we have to think about when we're communicating to our team members who are working so hard for us. And I think that it's important as leaders that we continue to show gratitude. I'm sure most of you are already doing that, but we want to continue to show gratitude to those who we serve and that are serving the organization. A question came in about being an inside rep and struggling with the manager because the manager doesn't offer mentorship. I think that sometimes we have this responsibility of our leader that they're not capable of meeting. We have to realize that our leaders are they're people. They don't have all the skills just because they have the title. And so to the extent that you have an expectation of your leader that your leader is not capable of meeting, then ask yourself whether or not there's somebody else who can still meet that expectation, right? I think that's across our entire organization. Sometimes wives want their husbands to be chatterboxes. Most men are not chatterboxes. Go talk to your girlfriend, right? It's like, we want people to play these roles sometimes that they're not capable of playing. And I think we need to be sensitive to that. Do you see anything else, Trina? I think we should.
How do you stay visible with top leaders during this time of Zoom meetings? You know what? I think just being prepared with information. Again, we talked about this, making sure that you have the answers to the questions before the questions are even asked. I love at a board meeting, someone will ask a question and I'll be able to say, you know what, we already thought about that. We already have a plan. Here's the answer. And that to me is really the best way of making sure that your leaders are satisfied with you. And it also they kind of relax a little bit because they know, you know what, she's got this. She knows what she's doing.
Right. And identify the champions on your team who may be smarter than you. I mean, you don't have all the answers. And I think sometimes as leaders, we think we have to be the mouthpiece. We always have to have something to say. We've got to be the one to come up with something. We don't have all the answers. What makes us a great leader is not really what we bring to the table. It's the people we select to ensure that together we can win. And so pick the brains of the individuals that you're working with. Don't carry the burden of leading your organization through this pandemic by yourself. You have chosen some amazing people to be on your team. Allow them to shine. Reach across to them and ask them what are some of the things that they think that we need to do. How do they think that we can pivot in our organization in order to safeguard the organization? What do they believe that their cohorts and the employees need? You don't have to come up with everything. Even though you feel like you're by yourself, you're not. You really aren't. And if you're looking for mentorships and sponsorship, you're not always going to get that from your boss. They may not necessarily be made up that way, or they may not be capable of communicating in that manner. Don't be mad at them. People are doing the very best that they can. And so Don't feel like you can't get what you want. You just might have to get it from somebody else, right?
I agree, especially during this particular crisis. This is something that, we use this word a lot, unprecedented, but it's hitting some people in ways that you may not realize.
Right.
Because now all of a sudden, it's not just about the business. People are dying. People are getting sick. People are losing people. I mean, there's a lot going on right now. So, and a word that you used, Scharrell, earlier is grace. Sometimes we just have to give people some grace and some space during this time.
Right. And as we get ready to end this morning's conversation, it's so important that we think about our needs, and then we remember that somebody else has those very same needs. I mean, people need to feel valued. People need to be told the truth. If they are not performing, they need to know that they are not performing. People need to understand what you expect from them. People cannot read your mind. If you have an expectation from someone, tell them what you expect. As business leaders, we have got to be more strategic, and our strategic plan should include the what if. It should never just be about how we're going to grow our business. Historically, I've always believed in having forecasts with revenue growth and forecasts with revenue loss. And then in my forecast with revenue loss, what do I do to the extent that happens? And by having that type of a plan, you are ready. You are proactive. And that means that you're going to be more conscientious of how you evaluate your team on an ongoing basis, not just in a pandemic. And you're going to be more honest and authentic. You're going to make sure that you have strong business rules in your organization, and those business rules come with consequences. And then you're going to be ready to pivot and make a shift when there's time to make one. You won't be so panicked and unsure of yourself. So I think that it's important, as we think about how we intentionally lead, that I like the word intention. Trina, you like the word intention, because it means that we are laser focused on that which we desire for ourselves and for those that we are responsible for. And I think that's the secret sauce to being an intentional leader. What about you, Trina?
I love that secret sauce. I love that secret sauce. Absolutely. Scharrell, this has been so much fun. In fact, you know what? We're going to have to get together and continue this conversation.
We are. I've always said that, I try not to dabble in space, which I'm not a perfectionist, because I'm a perfectionist. If I'm not great at it, I try not to dabble in that space. And I speak a lot. I speak a lot virtually. I speak a lot on stage when that was available. And I'm very comfortable doing that. But I realize that most of my energy comes from you. It comes from you guys. It comes from seeing your face. It comes from using the gifts and talents that I've been gifted with to be able to share. I think as leaders, our primary responsibility is make a positive difference in the lives of others. And so we're going to continue this experience virtually with Leadership in Heels. But first, before we close, I just want to tell you, Trina, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for making this a little bit easier for me. I really appreciate you. I love you. I am grateful to call you my friend, to be someone that I can go to who will tell me the truth about myself, even when it kills me. I just appreciate it. And thank you for moderating this morning's event.
It was my pleasure. It was a lot of fun. And I apologize if I wasn't looking at the camera. I can't help it. I'm looking at Scharrell and just having a real conversation with her. So thank you for having me. Thank you for supporting WHW. We are heading into one of the largest unemployment rates in the country's history. WHW works with job seekers, those who are unemployed and underemployed, as Scharrell mentioned. We have set up a plan to do virtual support of those job seekers going forward for the next 2 years. We'll be concentrating on that. So we appreciate your support in every way. And I'm looking forward to the next event.
Well, thank you, Trina. I appreciate it. So I just want to share with everyone again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. This has been inspiring for me. I'm continuing to learn as a leader on how to be more intentional with my style, my communication both at home, at work, and in our community. Everyone who knows me knows that I believe that you only have one life to live and it needs to be fully integrated, and we need to be the same wherever we go. I really do want to encourage you this morning to give yourself some grace. Be kind to yourself. Remember to ensure that you are keeping your tank full. Find your tribe of people around you who will encourage you, motivate you, and tell you the truth about yourself. Make sure that you are not making decisions from an emotional place. Fact check, and then make the best decision for you and your organization. Make sure that you take care of yourself, because you can't take care of others unless you are your best self. And set some reasonable boundaries. It's okay to walk away from the computer. Make sure you find some white space on your calendar and take some time off. I encourage you today to be intentional about being the best that you can be, starting with yourself. Have an outstanding day. Thank you so much for joining me with Leadership in Heal's first virtual event, Intentional Leadership, Leading in the Midst of a Crisis.